Hello and welcome back to bicyclelegs Talks Music, and sadly it's a time for another In Memoriam. Today we are remembering the wonderful life and works of Rick Davies from Supertramp. He was born on the 22nd of July 1944, passed away on the 5th of September 2025. We just heard about it today on the 8th. He'd battled multiple myeloma for the last decade. He had to cancel a Supertramp tour in 2015 because of the diagnosis, and unfortunately Supertramp have been inactive ever since. I'm not going to go into a lot of biographical detail about him. I'm sure lots of other people will cover all of that. I just wanted to talk a little personally about how his music affected me. And originally I made a whole other video where I looked at, the Supertramp catalogue from 1970 all the way through to 1987, which is the albums that I own. I don't actually own the later Supertramp album, sadly, something that I must indeed rectify. But I'll put up on the screen my collection of various Supertramp albums. I was going to talk a little bit about all of them and that sort of thing, talk about obviously the big hits that he had with songs like Bloody Well Right and Goodbye Stranger. But in the end, what I really wanted to do was focus on one album and not do a deep dive into it. I just want this to be a fairly short video. But I think this is an underrated and overlooked album. And I think it's a very important album when we're talking about Rick Davies in particular, when we're talking about Supertramp. And that is the album Brother Where You Bound from 1985. Now obviously this is the first Supertramp album that the band made after Roger Hodgson left the band. The songwriting had been shared very equally up to this point between Rick Davies and Roger Hodgson, although a lot of the Roger Hodgson songs ended up being the big hit singles, obviously with those exceptions that I mentioned before. But so in a lot of ways I feel like, certainly to the casual Supertramp fan, maybe Rick Davies got a little overlooked because most of the popular songs were Roger Hodgson songs. But Roger left the band after Famous Last Words, which is, one of the earliest Supertramp albums that I have memory of, although I'd heard some of the hits from Breakfast in America when I was very little. But this album came out in 1985. It was produced by David Kirschenbaum with the band. Now, I know David Kirschenbaum mostly for producing a lot of those early Joe Jackson albums. This album though, it's, Rick Davies is writing all the songs and singing all the songs. So he's very much at the forefront of this album. And I remember there's two tracks on this in particular that I really want to sort of zero in on. And I think they're the two obvious tracks, but I still think they're well worth talking about. The first one is the song that was the lead single, which is a song called Cannonball. It's a bit of a different sound for Supertramp. It's a little less poppy. It's a little more gritty. And I like that about it. And of course on the album, it's an extended version. It's nearly 8 minutes long. And that's the thing about this album. Supertramp were often sort of classified into the progressive rock camp, even though they don't really sound like a Yes or a Genesis or a King Crimson or anything like that. But on this album, you can really see them stretching out, doing some longer songs and showing their instrumental chops, as well as Rick Davies really showing both his vocal skills, his instrumental chops, but also his writing skills, because he's writing all of these songs on his own. I mean, back in the Supertramp days when it was Rick and Roger, They often wrote their songs separately but would credit them as being written by the duo, much like sort of a Lennon and McCartney kind of thing. But on this album, it's just Rick doing all the writing, and he really does stretch out. And Cannonball's such a great song, and it was a great introduction, I think, to the new Supertramp. I remember seeing the clip for it on TV and hearing the song on the radio. It wasn't a huge hit, but I really, really liked it. I was really drawn to it. And then a little later on, when I actually got this album, the title track, Brother Where You Bound, 16.5 minutes long. It's absolute epic. And you have David Gilmour playing the guitar solos on it. But you've also got Scott Gorham from Thin Lizzy playing guitar on that track as well. It's just amazing. But Rick, I mean, this was a song that kind of broke Rick and Roger up, because he wanted to include a version of this song on Famous Last Words, and Roger wasn't having any of it. And, you know, they ended up going, you know, Famous Last Words definitely in that more poppy kind of Supertramp sound. I still like that album a lot, don't get me wrong. I mean, the single It's Raining Again, I love that song. But, you know, Brother Be Your Bound was a whole different thing. And I absolutely love that about it. You know, as I say, musically, instrumentally, compositionally, this is Rick Davies and the band stretching out, really getting a bit prog. And I love that about it. It's such a great track. There is a video of the whole thing too that you can find on YouTube, and it's well worth checking out if you can get a chance to. So if you never really sort of explored beyond the hits and that sort of thing, you don't know a lot about Rick Davies' contributions to Supertramp, go and check this album out, Brother Where You Bound, because I think it's a really, really good album. And a great example of what Rick brought to the band and why he's going to be so sorely missed. So, Vale to Rick Davies, 1944 to 2025, died at the age of 81. Thank you so much for all the music, Rick. Thank you all for watching. Please let me know in the comments, you know, what your favourite Supertramp songs featuring Rick are. I'd love to share that with you. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, hopefully on a much happier note.